Welcome to the offseason for the Montreal Canadiens. As loyal viewers, listeners of this show can attest to, yes, the fact that we put out daily content is great. There is no offseason on this show with Marco D'Amico and yours truly. Nevertheless, I like sneaky stuff. I like when you go into a room filled with sharp people. Who's the sharpest of the lot? Is Kent Hughes and Jeff Gordon, are they the sharpest tandem in the National Hockey League, trying to build up their team for hopefully another successive run, shocking the world by making the playoffs? Let's talk about what we think the Montreal Canadiens are going to be up to, but of the different variety this time. I know lots of people are looking at the Mitch Marner buzz, the Sam Bennett buzz. Is the Canadiens going to get Brad Marchand? Let's go a little bit deeper than that. What do you think the shopping list looks like for Kent Hughes today as he starts to build this team up, as the rebuilding phase goes to another level in the eyes of some, Marco? So let's start there. Let's talk about some UFA targets that in our minds can help the Montreal Canadiens, maybe of the under-the-radar variety. What are they looking at?
Well, everyone's kind of looking to free agency right now to fill the number 2 center slot. And they're looking at the John Tavares. They're looking at, Michael Granlund, Matt Duchene. I don't know that that's going to happen. I think Tavares is going to re-sign probably in Toronto on a friendly-ish team deal. I think we're seeing numbers like $5 million. I don't think that's going to happen. I think he's going to be a little north of 6 there. Duchene wants to stay in Dallas, and it's looking like he's going to stay there. And Dallas is trying to move money, although there's been pushback on Robertson. They're trying to move guys like Marchment, Lyubushkin, who could be a good target for the Canadiens on right D. Hint, hint. To allow them to sign and keep these guys, because their strength down the middle. When you factor in guys like Wyatt Johnston, Rupe Hintz, and then you have Granlund, and you have Duchene, and you have Seguin, and you can play all these guys wherever you want in your lineup. Well, that's the kind of love that they need down the middle, and they want to keep that. So most of those targets, my honest opinion, a little unrealistic.
Right.
You want to look at a realistic target? Claude Giroux. Has been in contract negotiations with the Ottawa Senators for the last 4 weeks.
Yeah.
I don't think it takes that long to get to this point. And I think Claude Giroux at this stage in his career is a plug-and-play top 6 player with a lot of experience that could help the Montreal Canadiens if they are unable to trade for a bona fide second-line center that could grow with Ivan Demidov, right?
Yeah.
They have to, the Canadiens were very clear about this. We want to bring in someone who is either going to be on a short-term deal with higher salary so that they don't block a younger player from coming into the lineup eventually, which Michael Hage in this case, if they when they view it that way, or maybe a prospect that they draft in this upcoming draft at center, who knows? But they don't want to stop. They would prefer a stopgap than to giving a large contract to a player that is not going to be as good when the Canadiens are going to need them to be competitive. So I could see a guy like Claude Giroux making a ton of sense just because he brings that experience, can play center, has the acumen, has been captain before, can bring leadership to the room, can support a guy like Nick Suzuki.
Yep.
It just checks off all the boxes. And he would probably not want to sign a too long of a contract. Obviously the way that he plays and the way that he is, I don't necessarily see it from his perspective either that he's going to want necessarily to break the bank. But at 37 years old, the Canadiens can play this game where they can give him, when you're 35 and up, you can give bonuses on contracts. And I think that's where it could be interesting.
What the only thing that scares me about that is if Claude Giroux's camp starts poking around, looking around for other suitors because things are sour in Ottawa, as an example, and that the offers coming back don't flatter him, he's unimpressed, but then the Canadiens come in, would that not reek of, he settled for the Canadiens? Because, you dropped his age. He's 37. He's been around, right? Yeah. What are guys at 37 that don't have cups, what are they looking for? Is he looking for a Stanley Cup? Is he looking to join a team with is he trying to do a Brad Marchand? Is he trying to find a team with a realistic shot that he can help out and say, I'm finally going to get my ring And as much as I want the Canadiens to win their 25th Stanley Cup, I'm not ready. I'm not the guy today to tell you that it's coming and it's going to be built this summer. So that's
Yeah.
the one thing that gives me pause is his age. And if he doesn't get an offer, I would feel like he would settle for the Montreal Canadiens.
I think there will be offers. I think the Canadiens have the financial flexibility, especially we'll see what they do with Carey Price's contract, but they have the financial flexibility to perhaps offer him a little bit more than some of these other competitive teams. And on the flip side, without being disrespectful, he already took a chance on a rebuilding team in the Ottawa Senators when he signed there 3 years ago.
Right.
So if winning was the ultimate,
Fair.
so I think being closer to home was the selling point. And if it's not Ottawa, Montreal's right there.
Yep.
So I could definitely see it. Now again, that's just one target that you can kind of look at and point out because
what about this target? I have a target for you. Now I know he's on a 3-year contract, right? And there's a connection with Adam Nicholas because at the time, Adam Nicholas, of course, is the director of player development with the Canadiens, but he was also with the Chicago Steel, and that's where Mackie Samoskevich with the Florida Panthers comes in. I'm curious about the depth of Florida, and not priced out, but buried on a very, very good, deep team. I'm curious if there's a trade there that could possibly, is that someone that you look at, Mackie Samoskevich, also named an arena after him somewhere. I'm kidding. But no, seriously, the Samuel Moskovich Arena. That's the joke there. The funniest jokes are the ones that need to be explained. What about that as a potential target, Marco?
Well, he's not a free agent.
No,
He's
correct.
RFA, I believe. But
yes.
When you look at the way that Florida is built right now, like I don't think Brad Marchand is coming back. I don't think that if they want to go for Mitch Marner and they're going to keep a guy like Sam Bennett, they may have to move a guy like Carter Verhaeghe, for example.
Oof.
When you have these cheap players that are cost control that you can plug into your top 9 at will,
move those guys, right?
When you're a contending team and you're Florida, you don't have a first round pick till like eternity. So they have to keep these guys. And he may even be a trade chip for a piece they need next year down the line if they decide to potentially go for a three-peat. So
gotcha.
It's that kind of a situation that makes it difficult to project. And I think if the Canadiens are going to spend assets on a premium position, it's probably going to be either center or right D. I don't think they would send futures for a guy like Mackie just because he potentially would be available. And my 2 cents, if there was a player to target on the Florida Panthers and they decide to price themselves into the sweepstakes for a guy like Mitch Marner, and they signed Sam Bennett to the rumored 8x8, it would actually be Anton Lundell that I would be looking at.
You brought that guy's name up to this channel 2 months ago, as a matter of fact. To that point, I saw some people last weekend kind of referencing you, dropping your handle on social media, saying, hey, ever since Marco brought this guy's name up. But to your point about Florida's depth, and all signs, all credible insiders are pointing to Sam Bennett returning to Florida, right? So they're probably going to run it back. How does that scenario work out? Is Anton Lundell frustrated about his playing time? Is he an Alex Newhook, feels that his talents are being underused and just put me on a better team and watch me go off?
The thing is, they have Luostarinen as well that could be the 3C, right? So they have the depth at center, and it's Florida. They can sign bottom 6 players to league minimum that are going to produce 30, 40 points because they have the established core, because they're in Florida and it's a no state tax. Like they could afford to bring in these guys because of the opportunity to win and the higher gross earning potential on their salaries. So they're fine there. But the way that I see it is you have Barkov at 10, Sam Bennett at 8, and him at 5. That actually works out. It's not that bad. But man, their defense is going to struggle to keep up if they lose a guy like Ekblad and then Montour the year before. Like those are huge. 2 huge steps down. Mikkola has progressed nicely for them, but at one point they're going to have to sacrifice a piece of their roster, and it may end up having to be a guy like Lundell. We'll see, because they have a Luostarinen that can kind of come in and be that third line center. I feel like he's like a premium third line center in Lundell right now, but in most teams he actually should be a second line center, especially on Montreal. So a target, but not a free agent target. If we bring it back to free agency, one of the guys we've talked about before is Nick Perbix.
Yes. I'm glad you brought. I have
That's
his name. I have his name on my
yeah.
list too. I'm glad you brought him
Nick
up.
Perbix is a guy I haven't heard. I've tried to do some homework. I haven't heard many negotiations between him and the Tampa Bay Lightning, so it
Yeah,
looks
this is
like he
an
may be going to
RH
market.
right-handed defenseman, Tampa Bay Lightning, very high on the radar. I
He
love
got
this name.
experience,
Yeah,
playing
yeah,
with Tampa, as plays that mean third pair bottom role. Probably a guy you can get for about $3 million. This is a guy that I would look to, and he's played up and down Tampa's lineup, right? He's played with the likes of Hedman before, Sergachev. Like, he's played on that right side and helped anchor down pairings. That could be
exactly.
an interesting guy that you can bring in to kind of help, a guy like Lane Hudson, so that you can recalibrate your defense and have your lefties on your left and your righties on your right,
Yeah.
and then slowly bring in, David Reinbacher and Logan Mailloux, so that they're not just thrown to the wolves next season.
Mm-hmm.
Because the
Mm-hmm.
Canadiens have also mentioned that there's a significant lack of experience. And if the Canadiens do trade Mike Matheson, then you're left with only Alex Carrier as a veteran on
Oh
that defense. You can't.
God,
I
they
know a lot
better
of
do.
people are going to be like, just go for it, right? But
No,
in life, in
no.
life, in real life, when you're on a
Yes.
team of any sort, this transcends sports.
Yeah.
You have to have people that pull the ship forward, talented people that pull the ship forward, but you also need people that are wise and have been there before and can show those talented players how to avoid certain mistakes in life. And we saw it a lot in the playoffs, with David Savard. He was far more vocal on the bench and more of an asset to the team and helping to teach the kids as they were playing in the playoffs
Yeah.
than he actually was on the ice. And so you need to bring an element, you need to bring a player now who can do both effectively, teach and play. And I think a guy like
Mm-hmm.
Perbix can do that because he's been in that situation. So
And what
he's a
about
guy I've been
Dimitri?
looking at.
What about Dmitry Orlov out of Carolina? Veteran guy, 33 years old, going into a
Well,
UFA season. I'm just to the point of the kind of Michael Hage thing. You're looking for players, at least I think they're looking for players that can
mhm.
be plug and play for a few years, and then evolution takes over and the next wave of guys come in. Because
My only
I
problem,
am not in favor of trading Mike Matheson and populating the Canadiens defense with inexperienced guys learning the job while doing the job. I'm not a
yeah,
fan of that
I
strategy.
I don't think Orlov makes much sense just because he's a lefty as well.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay.
He was used a little bit on the right in Carolina when there were injuries, but again, I just don't see a fit. I think like teams that are desperate for left D. So you're looking at like the LA Kings, the New York Rangers. Those are teams that are going to throw money at these guys, right? Like
Man,
the
they're everywhere.
Gavrikovs,
Those
the
two teams.
Provorovs, the
Yeah.
Orlovs, all the Ovs are on the market right now. So at this point, I could see it for them.
Yeah.
The other element, and I think this is probably the most interesting one because everybody's looking at the major needs, right? But the Canadiens are also looking for middle six scoring. And this is kind of interesting to me. You're looking for middle six scoring because most of the players they feel are going to play on their bottom six in the near future were all rookies this year in Laval,
Yeah.
right? You look at the
Yeah.
Owen Becks, you look at the Oliver Capitans, you look at Florian
Florian
Jacki, who
Xhekaj,
looks
yeah.
to be crash and bang bottom six center as well. These guys probably going to need another year in Laval to develop their offensive game more. For Florian's sake, develop more of his playmaking to full offensive game. He was a very good goal scorer, but in the NHL, especially in that role, you got to see the ice a little better. You got to use your teammates. We didn't see much of that in the playoffs. I think he needs to show that he can reproduce that season to then transition to the NHL. Owen Beck, same thing. He's got to take it up a notch offensively. You got to expect a guy like that to be a point per game player, like Jake Evans was at the
Sure.
same time,
Mm-hmm.
right? He was a
Yep.
point per game player before he got called up to Montreal. I think Beck needs to get there. And then you're going to have guys like Tyler Thorpe, Luke Tuck. These are all guys that need some mileage, right? So you want to buy those guys some time. You have Emil Heineman already in your lineup. You want to bring a guy that's got experience that could possibly replace a guy like Armia, who they have not indicated they would want to bring back yet. And if I'm
Mm-hmm.
the Montreal Canadiens, are you looking? You can go two ways on this. You can either go crash and bang and look at a guy like Tyler Janot, who
Sure.
probably won't command as much coming out of LA, right? Because he didn't have the offensive uptick that the Tampa Bay Lightning thought he was going to have when they acquired him from the Nashville Predators.
Mm-hmm.
Or you could look at another friend of Mr. Kent Hughes, and Anthony Beauvillier, who was very good for the Washington Capitals. I think we could all remember
No
when he
doubt.
was subbing in for Alexei Protas.
Yep.
right? And so that's a former client of Ken Hughes, A, so obvious connection.
That was a
But
very
B,
good line he was on during the 5-game
yeah,
series.
but B, this is a guy that, for example, and I'm not saying this to be mean, but for example, Patrick Laine has a bad game. He's a guy that you could put up on the second
Yeah.
line to flip up your lines, and he gives you options. And he's a guy that could be effective on your second power play wave. And again, these are guys that probably won't cost you much, but on a 1-2 year deal, they're going to be able to play in a higher situation than they would on a competitive team to allow them to springboard that into another contract. And it helps the Canadiens because, boom, he's a stopgap.
Yeah.
Right. So again, some of those guys that you don't normally think about because everyone's kind of focused on the top 4D or the 2C. But there's one in particular. There's one guy that I continue to be adamant about, and that's Perbix. I think Perbix is the perfect fit for what Montreal needs. And I just don't see a world where the Montreal Canadiens are going to play both Logan Mailloux and David Reinbacher in the lineup at the same time.
Great take.